Now, I just started reading a book titled, let me get its title accurately, Theologico-Political Treatise. This is a book that was published in 1670s in Netherlands. But before I started reading this book, I decided to read another book that tells the story of this book I'm reading. And the first book I decided to read is a book by a gentleman known as who goes by the name Stephen Nadler, and the book is titled A Book Forged in Hell. And in this book, he tells about, or he gives us details and the context and the story about the theological-political treatise and the controversy that surrounded its publishing, um, and what happened after. And of course, he kind of reviews it in detail. The book, A Theologico-Political Treatise, was published, as I've said, in 1670. And it's written by a philosopher by the name Baruch Spinoza. Maybe you've heard about him. It seems like he's someone who is well known, especially by people who are interested in philosophical content. This guy, in fact, has been described by, I was looking around, he's been described by a few people as one of the foremost thinkers of the early days of the Enlightenment era. Um, yeah, so it's a big deal. And the book itself caused a lot of controversy in Netherlands and Europe and later on around the world. And getting the story about this book, I saw a lot of parallels between the book itself and the writer Spinoza and Bitcoin and Satoshi Nakamoto. And I'm going to explain in a moment how I'm going to put to you those parallels so you can decide for yourself whether I'm right or I'm wrong on that, or what I'm seeing is really what I'm seeing. So when Spinoza wrote this book, or when he published, or he had it published, Europe was coming out of this era where the state and religion were more like one thing, and even trying to suggest that the state can exist separate from the religion of the church was something that was very much unacceptable to many people. And the citizens had been born, and their own parents, their grandparents, and long generations of people who've come to believe that religion and state have to be just one. Like that's how it had always been. That's how it was, and of course they expected that that's how it was going to be for maybe forever or until the end of the world, because most of those people believed that there will be an end of the world, of course. So this book written by Baruch Spinoza, he was trying to and I need to mention this, Netherlands at that time was on paper a secular state, but in reality it was still the state and the religion were like just one and the same thing, I can say the religion and the church in particular had a lot of influence on the state. Things that were done in the state had to first be kind of like approved by the clergy. If the clergy didn't approve something, then of course it wouldn't be accepted or allowed to happen. So that was the kind of society that Spinoza was living in. Spinoza himself was of Jewish extract. His parents had come from the Iberian region, I think Portugal, if I'm not wrong, and they moved to Netherlands. I think he was born in Netherlands, and he was, of course, born into the Jewish religion, but at some point he kind of left the religion and he became kind of like somebody who followed another path. So anyway, so when the book was published, number one, the book was not published under his name. It was published under a pseudonym. The pseudonym was Enricus Kunrat. And Enricus Kunrat was a German guy who lived like 50 years before. So they picked that name, and they also indicate that the book was published in Hamburg and not in anyway, Netherlands, and they did that because they wanted to avoid Spinoza and his publisher wanted to avoid attention. So they published under a pseudonym. They claimed that it was published in Hamburg. They also had the book written in Latin and not in Dutch. All this they were doing, trying to avoid the attention of the Dutch authorities. But when the book came out, it created a storm because it was kind of like talking about these ideas that nobody had ever even entertained, or most people were not comfortable entertaining such ideas, the ideas of removing religion from the state working or processes. That's not the only thing that is in the book, or the only issue that he tackles in the book. He tackles other issues, but it seems like that was the main thing, like getting religion out of the state and letting the state be the state and religion be the religion, basically creating a separation of state from religion. And there was a lot of controversy. The clergy mobilized people and they lobbied the government, and the book was banned. And in fact, Nadler tells us that many copies were taken out from bookshops and banned, and you could not easily get a copy of the book at that time. And and Spinoza remained to be unknown. While the book was creating all this chaos around, nobody knew who wrote the book really. They knew the name that was appearing was Enrica Kuntrant, but of course, I guess many people realized that was a pseudonym. But in fact, nobody knew it was him who wrote the book, except very few people who are very close friends of his. And it only it came to be known it was him who wrote the book after he was dead. In fact, I think maybe a few years after he was dead, that's when it now became known to many people that it was Spinoza, Baruch Spinoza, who wrote that book. Now, fast forward to 2009 or 2008, Bitcoin shows up. It's a white paper written. It's written by somebody who goes by a pseudonym. It can be argued, and especially when you look at the conversations that Satoshi Nakamoto had with a few people, especially on forums online, he was very cautious and afraid of attention from authorities about his invention, the Bitcoin. And in the early days, he didn't really want attention, because he knew that attention will likely, if it's discovered, then maybe Bitcoin will not have reached where it is today. Somebody would have nipped it on the bud. For him, when he was doing this, I think for most people, like it was in the 17th century, that in some places in Europe and other parts of the world, just even trying to say that the state and religion should be separate was something, an idea that was not only unacceptable, but seemed like crazy to many people. In 2008, the idea of separating money from the state is an idea that's even today is very unacceptable to many people. And to very many people, when you say the money and state can be separated, it sounds weird. So it's kind of the same thing, even though we are talking about two different uh, things, but you can see the logic is more or less the same. Now, people are talking about separating money from the state. It's weird, it's unacceptable, it sounds like crazy idea. In the 17th century, saying the state and religion should be separated was weird and crazy and unacceptable to many people. But of course, today, many people, or people from most parts of the globe, would agree that the religion and the state should be separate. It's now like accepted, even though there are pockets or places here and there where religion and the state is still the same thing. But the general trend is that state and religion are separate. Maybe moving forward at some point, it will be so acceptable that money and the state are separated. So the parallels I found in the story of Spinoza and the story of Nakamoto, of course, is number one, they published their work under pseudonyms. Baruch published his book under pseudonym. Satoshi published his white paper, and later on, we can say published the Bitcoin code under pseudonym. And then Baruch, he lived and nobody really knew it was him who wrote the book. Up to this point, it's almost over 10 years. We don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is. Maybe he's still alive, maybe he's dead. It's likely maybe we'll later on know who he was, maybe after he's dead. We never know. Maybe when he's still alive, we never know. But there's that sameness in that aspect. There is also the aspect of the Baruch's book created a lot of crises, and it brought this tension, and it really made some people feel very uncomfortable, and some steps were taken to kind of kill it. I would say the same thing is happening with Bitcoin. There are so many people are feeling very uncomfortable with Bitcoin being around. Maybe it's threatening their power, and maybe they are taking steps, or I think some of them are taking steps to curtail it, to kill it if they can through one way or another. So there are similarities. So what I'm learning from this comparison is that change always meets resistance, even when that change is really good. It meets resistance, and that's because people are always comfortable with what they know, especially when they benefit from that. And often the people who benefit are able to influence those who don't benefit to kind of feel like, oh, this thing is good and we should retain it. Yeah, so I'm still reading the book. Yeah, but I thought I should make a video because as I was reading the first book, Book Forged in Hell, which is about now the book, and I was reading about this story about Baruch Spinoza and the controversy that his book created, and him deciding to publish the book anonymously. And I saw these parallels, and I decided, oh, let me create a video and talk about that.